Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if Europeans were immune to tropical diseases. First of all, I know that this is a vast overgeneralization, but some of you may know the yellow fever and also malaria, for instance, which was also called the Roman fever. Most of the time we associate these sicknesses with Africa because many outbreaks happen in Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa. I know this may be due to poor infrastructure and healthcare, but we are not here to discuss problems in Africa, but an alternate history. Nowadays, some, if not most, of the causes of disease can be treated with basic hygiene, medicine, and proper treatment, of course. Still, many people are dying because they don't have access to that, or they are just too poor to afford it. Many people get over the time an immunity to certain sicknesses. Europeans, for instance, were immune to many sicknesses which were deadly to Native Americans and wiped out some 50 until almost 90% in some cases of the population. In Africa, many Europeans were not immune to the sicknesses in there and died mostly after a year maximum. There were also recorded cases where Africans in the Americas got sick with the yellow fever but survived it, while most of the Europeans who got sick died very quickly. Sub-Saharan Africa had also been largely ignored by the Europeans simply for the fact that the Europeans couldn't settle in there or died instantly. But what if all of that changed? What if Europeans were immune to tropical diseases? The point of divergence is that Europeans after the malaria outbreak in the Roman Empire would get an immunity which would be passed to the generations to come. People living closer to Northern Africa would thus have a higher immunity than Northern Europeans or Eastern Europeans, for instance. As for yellow fever, we could make a similar argument because in the 17th or 18th century we had outbreaks in southern Spain, Gibraltar and France, reacted to it by stationing 30,000 French troops in the border with Spain to prevent the yellow fever from spreading into France. So, a yellow fever outbreak in the times of Rome or even the antiquity could be very likely, and Europeans would again get an immunity in this timeline. The biggest change we will have is that with such an immunity, most Europeans can settle down in tropical regions. This doesn't mean that we will see a genocide on Africans or other natives, because most Native Americans, for instance, died due to diseases that were imported by the Europeans. Africans, they were more resistant and they already had indirect contact with Europeans and their diseases, and thus only warfare would kill either Europeans or Africans. Due to the lack of number from the Europeans and the resistance to European diseases, Africans will actually still be numerous all around Africa. Another aspect I would like to add is that the Atlantic slave trade will become less important than in OTL, and thus we will once more have more Africans within Africa who won't be shipped to the colonies and die on their way to the colonies. I will later explain why this would happen. On another note, much of the African coast will see several Portuguese cities pop up. This won't be simple trade hubs, but may evolve into cities similar to Goa or Macau in Asia. We won't just see Portuguese people growing there, but also Spanish people, Flemish, Dutch, Italians and other Europeans as well. Several Africans would also settle in there, and the Portuguese would control several areas in the same way as they did in OTL's India, through indirect control. I also believe that some places like Angola would be settled down earlier than in OTL, by Europeans due to the fertile lands. The same may even be possible for southern Africa. It is entirely possible that less focus will be put on Brazil, but the treaties between Portugal and Spain won't be altered. Portugal was still ambitious and would still want to have a chunk of the New World for itself. Spain would first and foremost focus on the Americas, but over the time, indirectly and thanks to the personal union over Portugal, which would not change, have some control in Africa as well. Some cities may grow and become fully fledged colonies, equal to those of OTL in Northern America, for instance. We will also have more mixed people, as Africans would want to trade with Europeans, and Europeans would use them as translator or as assistants to find resources. Due to the fact that most Africans required wouldn't be just slaves, I also believe that the general perception of sub-Saharan Africans would be better, and both could see eye to eye. France, England, the Netherlands and even the Scandinavians would also set their eyes on Africa and we could get more competition starting in there, and settlement colonies even, or cities, etc. in Africa. The Ottomans wouldn't expand beyond the OTL's border because the Sahara was a natural border nonetheless, and the Ottomans weren't known as a naval power. The African kingdoms and states would over time also be able to modernize, and we could see several successful sub-Saharan African empires arise. The first empires would probably be centered around the coast and fight over African kingdoms and be seen as a European satellite, but might over time enter into conflict with European powers. These African empires could be taken by nomads or tribes from the jungle, for instance, or from the Sahara Desert, and we could see similar cycles as elsewhere in the world. Why would the Atlantic slave trade become less important? Before sending Africans to the Americas, the Native Americans were used in the plantations or the mines. Many of them died. Next step was to send Europeans who were in debt or committed crimes. They died in OTL due to the tropical diseases, but in this timeline, they don't. And thus the Caribbean would look more like an earlier version or alternate version of Australia, a place where criminals would be sent, or a French Guiana on steroids. This has also a large implication for the Caribbean, especially. The Caribbean would be more white and have a more European-centered culture. Moreover, less troops would be sent to crush slave rebellions, as there wouldn't be that many slaves to begin with, and those that stay in there, the troops, they won't die as they are already immune to the sicknesses. Plantations could start to exist in Africa as well, and the Caribbean wouldn't be the only place where sugar canes would be grown. Countries like Haiti, Liberia won't exist, and the whole south of the US would have an entirely different culture. Would slaves still be shipped and brought to the Americas? Yes, but to a much lesser degree. Slavery would thus never be an important issue in this timeline. How would the world look like? First of all, the Americas would be more white than in OTL. The Caribbean may even never get independence from their motherland, while Australia and New Zealand may have a much smaller population than in OTL, and we may see even a bigger influence of the Aborigines or the Maori people. Africa would see its own share of colonies, but at the same time, African kingdoms would modernize, adapt, and form their own empires, which could severely weaken the European hold over African coastal region, and perhaps some of these African empires would even expand beyond. We would see several European cities all over Africa, earlier settlement in areas such as Angola, for instance, and more mixed regions and more mixed populations. There would never be a scramble for Africa, but there would be a worldwide competition for colonies and resources. I also believe that in general Europeans would have a more positive view of Africans, or at least have some form of respect for them earlier on, and vice versa. And that's where we leave it for now. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.